Welcome back to Omni Football. Today is a very special episode here. We have Luis Martinez here for your viewing and soccer informational pleasure. He is also my father, and we are going to be coming to you today. Want to give them an introduction about who you are and what you're all about?
Hello, everyone, and it's nice to be here. I wanted to give you a little bit of background on my football history. I don't go as far back as the Chinese when they invented the game, or the Maya when they were still using a square ball, to play their games and all of that. But I do have a past. I do have a history, and so we're going to be sharing a little bit of my experiences in the past during this episode. So, and at the same time, I want to kind of let you know that I'm kind of thinking about my future brand. What is that going to be? So, anyway, but we'll in the comments we'll get your feedback, and between the two of us and all of our viewership, we can decide what my future brand's going to be. So.
Right.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for that thrilling and warm welcome from you. So my dad didn't really give you his credentials, but he has been a coach for a while now. You haven't coached recently in the last couple of years, but I know that you have been a coach for plenty of years when I was growing up. Probably like 5 years at least. Would that be right?
I coached AYSO only for about 7 years, but that's not my only history in the game. Mm-hmm. I've been watching the game with my dad when I was young. I never really played it, interestingly, because for some reason I play basketball even though I'm very short. But I didn't really play the game when I was growing up. But then as I was older, I got into it, and I was wiser and kind of knew more about what the game needed and how it needed to be played, except that my body wasn't doing the things that I wanted it to do. But I do have a lot of experience in the game, and it's a beautiful game. So hopefully I can start sharing some of those experiences with you, and include that here for our fans,
yeah,
his fans.
Well, for our fans, yeah, they're all the same at this point. So what's it called? So in terms of my dad's history, I know that you've definitely have seen the history of the MLS more, probably from a more complete perspective than my viewing of the MLS. I was born in 1992, and the MLS started in 1996. So when I was 4, I wasn't really, really absorbing the soccer culture of the United States like you probably were. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about here at the beginning of the podcast. We're going to be talking about the differences that my dad can bring to the talk here. About what he thinks and what he's seen from then, the very early days of the MLS, to now what it is like. And so what do you remember about those days?
As you were saying, it started back in 1996, and I wasn't at the very first game, but I remember that it was a huge thing where they were not expecting as many people as there was like 60,000 people that showed up for the first game. And no one, the police and everyone wasn't really prepared for the amount of people that showed up for the first game. And it was a great success for the first game, but it wasn't. And I thought it was going to continue to build up. And so it's going to be 60,000 the first game, and it's going to be 65 the next, and 70 the next, and so on and so on. But it didn't work out that way. It was 60,000 the first game, and then it went down to maybe 20, 30,000. And the reason for that is because the quality of play on the field was not what the people that attended the first game maybe were expecting or used to, because maybe a lot of them had seen a lot of games on TV and other leagues. And when the league started, the quality of play for MLS was actually pretty laughable. And it was actually taken that way by the fans and also by some of the players, because I remember that the Galaxy used to have Jorge Campos as the goalkeeper, and I don't know if you remember him. But it was more of a spectacle than really a soccer game. Jorge would sometimes take the ball as a goalkeeper, and he would dribble all. And I don't know if you remember that.
No, I don't.
But he would take the ball, he would kick it out. I mean, he would roll it out of the box, and he would start dribbling all the way down to the other end to try to go score. And that was like, no one does that. In the modern game.
Did he ever score?
I don't remember if he ever scored, but he would kind of do that because he thought it was so cool. And sometimes he would, because I think it was part of his contract, he would actually become a field player where he would give up his goalkeeper jersey to somebody else, and he would become a regular player on the field. I mean, they still had 11 players, obviously, on the field.
Right.
But that's kind of an example of the laughable part of MLS at the beginning of its history, and so people didn't really take it seriously. So, it's 1996, and I'm happy that MLS survived and that it's still here, and that we have a great league nowadays. But it was pretty laughable at the beginning. So
yeah, that's interesting. That's a pretty compelling thing that I've never really even thought about. I mean, I think the perception about the MLS is that it is kind of like an amateur league or retirement league. Both of those adjectives are used to describe the MLS, and I suppose that probably at the beginning of the history of the MLS in 1996, it probably was, to be honest. I mean, you've described it as the play on the field to be kind of amateurish.
It was very amateurish, and there was a couple of other things where the league, the commissioner at the time, and the people in charge of MLS were trying to make it appealing to whomever wanted to go to the games, right? And for example, there used to be no draws, no ties during that time. And it's like, wow, if you got to the end of the game and you were like 0-0 or 5-5 or 10-10, you had to go to either penalty kicks or shootouts. Right. And I don't know if you remember the shootouts, which was something that, is like an American experience, because they were trying to make sure that there was enough scoring in the game and this and that. So
that's pretty interesting. Let me jump in there. The shootouts of for those who have never seen it, if you've ever seen hockey, hockey's like shootout procedure is similar to how the MLS did it back in the early days, which is not a worldwide acceptable way of doing it. Worldwide, soccer is known for having ties, which is actually one of the most common score lines, is 0-0 and 1-1. And in the early days of the MLS, I suppose they didn't allow that, and so they would go to shootouts. Shootouts is where the goalkeeper would start in the goal, and the attacking player would, instead of take a penalty kick, they would start at half field with the ball, and they would dribble at the goal to try and score. And I mean, I remember when I was young, I remember loving that because it was an exciting thing, for just in general, it's a breakaway. But now as I'm older and more well versed in the sport, I don't think that shootouts is
part of the reason
to be serious.
That's part of the reason why people didn't take it seriously, because the people that were connoisseurs of the game or knowledgeable of the game just didn't see that. They saw that as something that was kind of very amateur, and so that luckily eventually went away. So The other thing that and I don't know if you know who Elizabeth Shue is. She's an actress.
No.
Her brother played for the first season for the Galaxy, and it was a big deal because this actor guy, his name was Andrew Shue.
Okay.
It was like, oh, Andrew Shue's playing for the Galaxy, even though his main thing was being an actor, not a soccer player. Yeah, so it's kind of like, and it's
That's
understandable because the league was just starting and they were trying to draw attention to the spectacle and to the game, even though everybody is kind of rolling their eyes because it's like, what is this? This is a joke, and this is not how you play the game, and this is not what the game's about. But it survived and it's still here, and it's totally different from what it was back in 1996 when Jorge Campos used to dribble out of the box and try to go score and somebody else, which is kind of
That's
silly.
such a troll move.
You can probably look it up and find a video.
I've seen it before. I think I've seen clips now that you've jogged my memory. I've seen clips of him taking the ball and like dribbling out. But yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about the MLS, I mean, I think the biggest kind of difference that I see is that there was only 10 teams to begin with, and now like there's a segment in this podcast that talks about the 30 teams that will be in 2023. I mean, it's definitely survived the amateur stage, and now it's definitely much different than it was.
It's one of the good things nowadays, 25 years later, is that the game and the whole league it's a professional league, and it's taken a lot more seriously by the fans in the US and
the players
and the players, and it's taken a lot more seriously around the globe, around the world also. So that's a good thing because now it's a serious league that takes the game seriously, and it's very enjoyable because of the quality of play on the field, not because of all these antics that they had to have at the beginning where, okay, you have to have Andrew Shue and Jorge Campos and a bunch of other things that I don't remember right now. The bad thing is that it used to be a more, I want to say, innocent league, that it was more amateur. It was more for the fans, for the people. And nowadays, just like anything else, it's a business. And so it's lost a lot of its stupidity, but some of its silliness. But it's also lost a lot of its innocence. So now it's a business, and to be honest with you, don't want to get into that, but I do kind of miss the Rose Bowl, which is where the Galaxy started. So, and I remember a lot of the things that went on over there. Some good, some bad. I mean, like I said, the game and the league is a lot more professional now. So, but here we are.
Yeah, definitely. It has grown, and if you jump into the MLS without any kind of context, you may still think that it's kind of amateur-ish compared to like the elite players or the elite leagues, but it's definitely very professional now. And if you've been following the MLS for years now, to the eye, the naked eye test, as I say, it has increased in quality on the field too. Definitely, there's no doubt about it. So with that, we'll take a small little break, and we're gonna come back and talk about another topic. So we're back, and we are now talking about the San Jose earthquake. So this segment of the podcast I'm calling the MLS road trip, and the MLS road trip consists of all 30 teams that will be in the league in 2023. And we've started in the top northwest corner of the United States of the MLS. And we've made it now down to one of the original 10 teams of the MLS, and it is the San Jose Earthquakes. They were one of the first of the 10 teams to be in the MLS, 1996, and they've had a pretty long history. I mean, there could be a whole podcast dedicated to each one of these teams, but the San Jose Earthquakes, definitely that podcast would have a lot to talk about. They've had a lot of history. They've won 2 MLS Cups. They've actually like defaulted as a team or went under and disappeared as a team for 3 years, and now they're back. Now they've been back and very relevant. They started life as the San Jose Clash, and right now we're going to talk a little bit about the history, but I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about the logos, because I'm really interested in logos and just how that's changed and evolved over the years. So I'm going to put up on screen their original logo as the San Jose Clash, and to be honest, I actually kind of like it. It's a pretty interesting design. They kind of didn't run with these colors after 1999, but it's supposed to be a scorpion, but it kind of looks like a pyramid. It's cool. It's pretty interesting. You say you kind of like this one, don't you?
I actually kind of like this because I think it's got a little bit more personality than, I don't know what the other thing is. It's like, how do you represent an earthquake, I guess? This at least, I don't even know what a clash is, and I don't know what a clash has to do with the scorpion or whatever that animal is, or...
Yeah, it's a scorpion,
reptile or dinosaur. It's not a dinosaur.
It's also not I don't know what it is, but it's a scorpion. It's an animal. But they changed their name in 2000 to the San Jose Earthquakes. And you're right. How do you represent
I kind of like the Earthquakes idea because obviously California is known for a lot of earth movement and shakers and all of that. I don't know that it's necessarily a positive thing to remind people that we're in the middle of, plate tectonics and all of that. So, but whatever. And I think just to kind of revisit a little bit of what you said about the clash and all that, I think that the league has actually, and I don't know if you ever talked about this, but the league is expanding, and you keep talking about having 30 teams, I think, in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
But remember that the league has actually contracted a couple of times because, and I don't know if you ever said anything like that, but one of the reasons why the Clash or the Earthquakes disappeared for a while, they actually moved to, somebody I think bought them or relocated them to Houston, and they became the Houston 1928 or something like that for a day or two. And I don't know if you remember that.
No.
When Houston was trying to come up with the name, they came up with this year, 1928, I believe it is. It's probably not, but it's a different year. And then everybody thought that name was not politically correct because it represented some bad things that some group did to another group. I mean, I'm being totally ignorant on that. But there was a big outcry over the name.
I've never heard of that.
And they changed it because they said, well, that's, it's kind of like the
Redskins.
Like the Redskins, something like that, and so they changed the name to the Dynamo, which I think it's a pretty cool name.
Okay.
Anyway, we're not talking about the Dynamo.
Yeah.
The Earthquakes disappeared because, or were relocated by the league, I believe, because there was a couple of times when the league actually needed to contract to stay viable and to stay in business because they were losing money because MLS is a single entity. And so they needed to kind of get rid of contract of some of the areas that were not profitable, and that's what happened with the Clash. They moved to Houston. Houston stayed there. There's still a team over there, but then I think eventually the Earthquakes bought another franchise, and now they have a team again. And I never liked them, to be honest with you. Nothing against anyone.
You definitely don't like them.
From a soccer point of view, because for many years they were actually a pretty good team. They were coached very well, and they had really good players. and sometimes they used to be the Galaxy, who I'm a fan of. I hated them.
You still pretty much hate them.
I don't hate them. I mean, nowadays is nothing. If any San Jose Earthquake fans out there never watches this, I'm happy that you're in the league. I'm happy. Right. I'm happy that you're in the league.
Well, okay,
but here's I don't hate you anymore because I don't hate you anymore. But I think that they've become irrelevant, and that's kind of sad because kind of like the Galaxy in the last couple of years, unfortunately, because the relevant teams nowadays are Atlanta. Seattle, Toronto, obviously the Crew, and unfortunately the Clash, the Earthquakes have become a little bit irrelevant, kind of like the Galaxy, even though the Galaxy, because here's the thing with the Earthquakes, they never seem to buy big names.
Yeah.
I think it's a different business model, but they just never seem to buy anyone big.
I think that they, in a similar way to the Galaxy, I think they allow their team to get too old. I know that Chris Wondolowski, who's one of probably their key guys, their best player of all time, I still believe he's still playing for them, and although I think that Chris Wondolowski is probably an MLS person of noteworthiness because of all of the goals and games that he's played in. I don't think that he necessarily represents the best MLS has to offer, even though the San Jose Earthquakes, is their best player ever of all time. And I think that at a certain point, to remain competitive in soccer, you have to. We were talking about this with Barcelona and Real Madrid and teams that are way bigger in scale and scope than the Earthquakes. But at some point you have to let go of the people who are older and bring in some young guys.
I'm not sure that Wando is their best player ever. He's their
the highest scoring
in the league
ever.
But he's also their most kind of notable, popular, or best known player in the last 5 years. But you got to remember that they used to have Wayne De Rosario,
mm-hmm.
who was an excellent player. And also, Landon Donovan played for the Earthquakes for a couple of seasons, and that's when they won, I think, at least one of their championships.
Two of their championships.
So, Wando is a great player, no doubt about it. He's even been with the national team, but I don't know that he is their best player ever. So, the other thing about the Quakes is that we kind of have to kind of put into context a little bit is that they're the original, what's it called, the California Classical, right? The hated rivalry between the Quakes, the Earthquakes, the Quacks, the Quakes and the Galaxy, right? And I think that kind of goes beyond a little bit more than just the soccer culture and the game, because I think there's also that rivalry between Northern California and Southern California, and how I think that there's a certain perception that maybe Northern California, for whatever reason, is better than Southern California, kind of thing. And the other thing for me is, why is it called Northern California? They're in the middle of this state. I don't get it.
We've talked about this already. They're in the northern part of the state.
They're not.
But anyways, no, you're right. I think part of the big thing to note about San Jose, and there's a lot to talk about. I mean, we could talk about their history, their wins, their names, their logos. But I also do think that one of the biggest things was, and continues to be, their rivalry with the Galaxy. The Galaxy and the Earthquakes made it to a couple of MLS Cups, not together, but in 2001, San Jose and the Galaxy played in the MLS Cup final. And it's the original MLS rivalry. There might be rivalries that are older, technically because they were formed in NASL. But in MLS, other than like maybe DC and LA, I think that San Jose and LA, because of that Northern Cal, Southern Cal rivalry. I mean, you have Golden State, Lakers, you have the San Francisco Giants and Dodgers. I mean, I think it's just a difference in culture. I mean, Bay Area people are really happy and proud of being from the Bay. And
I'm happy. I don't care. I mean, the Bay Area is a beautiful area.
But LA is
But I'm happy here in Southern California. I mean, we had a great day today.
Yeah. I mean,
I know.
But LA has its own like things to brag about, and it's also a worldwide phenomenon.
One thing that I can say though is I can see this coming is that although I think the original California Classico has kind of become a little bit of a irrelevant thing of the past, maybe because I don't see the rivalry between the Galaxy and the Earthquakes being as heated as it used to be.
Yeah.
I think the LAFC derby between the Galaxy and LAFC is now more relevant and it's more heated and it's more present because it's the immediacy, I guess, being so close to each other and all of that, right?
Yeah.
But I can see though where in the future, you know how they have the Cascadia Cup in the northern section of the league.
Yeah.
With Vancouver, Seattle and Portland, they have their own Cascadia Cup. I can see how in the future they're going to manufacture, someone's going to manufacture, I'm manufacturing it right now for you people.
Okay, so what's it called? Mr. Manufacturer?
The California...
Don't say cup.
Copa.
Oh my God. All right. Well,
Copa de California. It's kind of like
Copa Cali.
Copa Cali. It's kind of like the Tour de France.
Yeah. Except that's except it's not anything like that.
But we're manufacturing now. Sacramento, get with the program already.
Yeah, well, okay. I mean you're leading right to that point. Sacramento, I think, when it becomes a team, but you know what? I think it's going to be a while before Sacramento and San Jose really forge a good rivalry because. Although there have been teams that have entered into the league and done really well, like Atlanta and LAFC, I do think that there are teams that struggle even when they come into the league. Like look at Cincinnati, for example. They start really strong and hot, and there's a lot of buzz, but they're not necessarily that good on the field. So if Sacramento can be a good team on the field, then I can see San Jose and them being more of a rival than Galaxy and San Jose now.
It's even if it's not a rivalry in terms of quality of play on the field, I think that there's gonna be somebody will come up with some kind of California avocado cup or something,
I hope it's better. Yeah, I hope it's better. If you have any ideas, leave it in the comments.
The avocado cup sounds pretty good to me.
But we're gonna take one last break, and we'll be back to film our last section. Be right back. So welcome back to the podcast. So we are right now talking about the World Cup in US, the World Cup USA 94. Now, this is the official commemorative program for the World Cup in 1994. And if you look closely, these are actual tickets from the World Cup in 1994. And if you look even closer, you'll see that there is a one Luis Martinez. Maybe you can see that on the tickets. Oh my gosh, $22.50.
As it, I don't have my name on the back of my jersey because this is not even a jersey. But yeah, $27.50.
Yeah,
that was a bargain. Obviously, you can't. I don't even know if your Starbucks sells a cup of coffee for that. So anyway, so I know you mentioned this before in one of your previous episodes, that how MLS got started was that there was a requirement from FIFA, and we know who FIFA is, right? The great people of FIFA, and there's one day we'll have to do an episode about FIFA.
My YouTube channel has to be 100 billion times bigger to start taking shots at FIFA. So
we can take shots.
No, we're not taking any shots at FIFA here.
So the requirement, I believe, was that for the U.S., the United States of America, to be awarded the World Cup in 1994, that they had to create a league in 1996 is when it started, right?
I think they founded the MLS in 1994, but they didn't hit the fields until 1996.
So World Cup, as you know, I told you a little bit, semi-jokingly, a little bit of my background, my history of the beautiful game, which I think is the beautiful game. Kyle Martino said something really beautiful recently in an interview that is up on the MLS website about what the game is. I'm going to have to look it up. I wrote it down somewhere, and I'm going to have to maybe on the next one give it to Pablo so that he can read it for you. But I think it's pretty it's a definition of what the game is for the world, for people, and it really is a beautiful game from many aspects. And my history in the game is I've had the opportunity to attend several big events in FIFA, and the World Cup for me is, along with the Olympic Games, are probably the biggest celebration of humanity and life and brotherhood that the glove and the world can have in general.
Yeah, I think most people would probably agree with that statement. I mean, every 4 years, it's scarce. It's not frequent, and it's a way for countries that may not agree politically to put that all aside and remember why we do what we do and who we really are down underneath. And yeah, it's a bit of nationalism intertwined with it, but it's also fun. I feel like you can root for countries and teams that aren't your own, and really, it's great. It's a great thing. Now, I've seen only pictures of the World Cup in 1994, but you've been to 3 games. Do you remember anything from those games?
I remember attending the World Cup at the Rose Bowl. I didn't go to any of the other games at any of the other locations, and it was awesome. It was awesome. It was my first World Cup. It was the Rose Bowl holds, or used to hold, I don't know what the capacity is nowadays, but it used to hold between 90 and 100,000 people.
It's around that.
And each one of the games was packed. And each one of the games was exciting. And I went to 3 games, and only one of them was the U.S. men's national team playing in. But every one of them was super exciting. And I know I went to a game between Romania and Colombia, right? It was pretty exciting. And sure, there's people from Romania and from Colombia in the United States were a melting pot, right? But not everyone at the stadium was from Romania or Colombia. I'm not from Romania, and or from Colombia, even though some people say that I sound like Colombian. Then there's also the U.S. actually played in 2 of the games that I went to see, but every game was super exciting. Is super just something that you want to be part of because there's that rivalry, because if your team is playing against somebody else, then you're going to be rooting for your team. But I think in general, the game is when you win, you celebrate. But I think that if you lose to a superior team at that day, it may not necessarily be that way forever or every time, but you have the respect of the game, and you kind of celebrate it, with your rivals. So, and every game was like that. And then I also had the opportunity to attend and this is part of my history and my background, the World Cup in Korea, Japan,
2002.
And it's interesting. It's beautiful.
How would you describe a game in Korea or Japan
the
compared
difference,
to Pasadena?
The difference between Korea and Japan is that Korea, I believe, is geographically smaller than South Korea, by the way, geographically smaller than Japan, I think.
Yeah.
And when we went to Korea, everyone seemed to be in the game. You go out to the streets and everybody's celebrating and painting their faces and chanting and everything. Awesome. And so in Korea, everyone knew there was a World Cup and that they were supposed to be celebrating it. And it was like that. And I went to a game when Korea played against Italy.
In Korea?
In Korea.
Wow.
And it was crazy. And we couldn't even get back from the stadium back to the hotel. I don't even know how we made it back to the hotel, because everyone was celebrating down the street, because they beat Korea with the help of the referee.
Beat
Italy, and they moved on to, it was the knockout stages, and they moved on to the next. Anyway, it was crazy compared to Japan, where people didn't even know there was a World Cup going on.
Really?
So, I mean, yeah, they knew, but it wasn't like Korea.
Well, it wasn't crazy like Korea.
No. I mean, you had to go ask people where you could go watch on TV the World Cup, and it's like, what's the World Cup kind of thing? So different, I don't know, maybe different marketing, maybe different mentality. I know Japan has the J League, which is a beautiful soccer league, and I'm sure it's a quality league. But for the World Cup at that point, I don't think the interest was there compared to the way it was in Korea, and it was crazy. And then I also went to the Women's World Cup here. I know we went to the final, and you said that you were there.
Yeah, I was there.
We went to the final at the Rose Bowl, 1999, between the U.S. and China. And they went to penalty kicks, and a lot of players were almost ready to die, because there's like 150, on the field.
That was at Pasadena as well, wasn't it?
It was in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl. So, those are some of my experiences, and I think it's a beautiful game, and we should all enjoy it. And the great thing and the bad thing about football is that good thing is it's a year-round sport, because while the MLS is on recess, everybody else is playing. If everybody else is on recess, the MLS is playing, and then there's leagues all over the world, and because of time differences and calendars and everything, it seems like it's a year-round sport. So that's the good thing. That's also the bad thing, because it seems to never stop. I mean, it just keeps on going and going and going.
Well, then I have one last question for you, since you've had 2 World Cups under your belt, at least a handful of World Cup games in your CV. What do you think about the upcoming, not next year, but the upcoming 2026 World Cup in the U.S.? Do you think, knowing how it felt, knowing how it was when you were there in '94, do you expect it to be even more? What are your expectations of it?
I think it's going to be diluted a little bit. We're still 2026 is
5 years.
6 years away.
Yeah.
It's going to be diluted a little bit, because it's not played only in the U.S., right? It's going to be in Mexico, a few games, in Canada, which I think is great, especially for Canada, because Canada has never held a World Cup. They did hold the Women's World Cup, which is awesome. So it's great that they will hold some of the games for the men, but I think it's going to be diluted a little bit. But I think what happens now is the U.S. knows what the game is. The U.S. is a lot more informed now.
Yeah,
the U.S. is a lot more sophisticated. Over the last 25 years that MLS has been in existence, there's kids that started in 1996 when maybe they were 4 years old.
Maybe.
When they went to their first games. And now those kids are 25 years later, they're 29, 20-something, 30-something. And these are people that have grown to play and understand the game more. So I think there's going to be a lot more attraction. Maybe I think as we get closer to 2026, I think we're going to start kind of that excitement and all that's going to start ramping up. And then there's the other thing that now the U.S. businesses know it's a huge business. Soccer is probably one of the biggest businesses, well, maybe not, but the World Cup is definitely one of the biggest businesses in the world, one of the biggest events in the world. Yeah. When, I was recently reading about the viewership of the World Cup finals. And the Super Bowl is huge in the U.S. Yeah. It's the biggest
hundreds of millions of views,
and the World Cup is in the billions. And so it's so the U.S. know money, and they know how to make money, and they know where the money is, and so there's the business side, and then the emotional side. I think that the U.S. is we can spend a lot of time talking about, the U.S., the prospects of the U.S., the players. I know you touched on some of them the last time you said 11. And, excuse me, some of those guys I don't think you gave enough credit to some of them. They're world-class players, some of them, a few of them. And in 1994, when the World Cup was held in the U.S., I don't think the U.S. had
a full 11.
Yeah, no, I don't think we had many or any world-class players, and now we do. Now we have people like you touched on them, like Pulisic, like McKennie. Reina.
There were some that I didn't even touch on, like Tyler Adams, Aronson.
Tyler Adams, the guy's incredible. I think he should be in a bigger team, and I think eventually he'll make the jump. But those are, to me, they're either already world-class players, or they're getting to be world-class players, or playing against world-class players, and that makes them better prepared to represent the U.S., at the next World Cup. Yeah. And I think people know that, and so that's going to be exciting, and so all of that.
I think you're right, too. We're gonna finish up here, but in the end, I think, like we had said earlier, 60,000 plus people made it to the first MLS game, but, the quality on the field wasn't up to expectation. I think that in 2026, the team that the U.S. fields is going to be a much better team than I think we've ever seen so far. So I think quality attracts attention. So I think it'll be interesting. Yep. But with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. And we're going to go ahead and sign off.
What can I say? It runs in the blood.
So subscribe if you want more blood. So we'll see you all next time.
Give him a smile, son. Give him a smile.